Hi friends, the wasteland has 5 parts. Just as a tragedy, a classical drama, let's say take that of Shakespeare, has got 5 parts. So this is not accidental actually, very deliberate and thought after structure. Just like a drama. You have in a drama you have Act 1 exposition, Act 2 rising action, conflict is rising, Act 3 the peak of the height of the drama, the conflict and the crisis reaches its peak. Then there is a plateau and you have got at the end the denouement or the resolution or a partial, a catharsis in a drama, but here you have got a partial catharsis. Now what happens, you can see the burial of the dead. And interesting, another point that you have to notice, 2 sections have definite articles. One section has indefinite article. And 4th section has no article. And 5th section is an indirect speech, in the form of an indirect speech. What the thunder said, the direct speech would have been, listen, comma, inverted comma, what did the thunder say? Question mark, inverted comma. That would have been the direct speech form. But here it is, listen to what the thunder said. That is indirect form. Now the 2 sections with definite article, they observe the rules of definite article. That is, if the speaker and the listener know about a thing, we must use the definite article the. There it is. The burial of the dead, you know that. It is from the book of common prayer, used by the Anglican Church. Both the speaker and the listener know that. The fire sermon, both the speaker and the listener know that, because that is taken from Buddha's sermons. And now what happens? The 3rd one, nobody knows, so there is no article at all. It's a kind of newspaper heading. Newspaper headings in variety, use of variety. And the last one you find an indirect speech. It's something that happened much earlier. It's a past event. It's narrated to us. Understand? Other sections you will find something is happening just in front of you. April is the cruelest month, breeding lilacs out of the dead land, mixing memory and desire, stirring dull roots with spring rain. So it's happening before you. It's not a narration, but it is something is happening there. Understand? But then shifts to a narration. Window kept us warm, feeding a little life, covering earth in forgetful snow, feeding a little life with the dried tubers. So that is an echo, but the first 4 lines is happening there. And the last part, Shanti and so on, and the narration of Christ's suffering, there is also echoes of earlier sufferings and earlier admonitions. So that is indirect speech. The title is indirect speech. It's very interesting to observe these things. But there is a unity of action, unity of plot. Understand? And at the same time there is variety. You know, when the variety and complexity of modern civilization play upon the refined sensibility of the poet, what happens is the product will be this kind of poem. That already has said, in the last class I gave the quotation from the metaphysical poets written in 1921. Okay, so let us have a close look at the structure. So here it is, like a drama, exposition, the burial of the dead, exposing the wastelands, means just presenting before you, and barrenness of life. And next we have got a game of chess, dramatization of two types of sterile relationships. The first one, burial of the dead, spiritual barrenness, collapse of spiritual continuity, fragments of voices and memories, death without the hope of resurrection. That is the point. Death without the hope of resurrection. Reversal again. In the prayer book, it begins like that, I am the resurrection. That means there is a hope of resurrection. But here, in this burial of the dead, there is absolutely no hope of resurrection. That's why the burial of the dead is reversed. Everything is reversed. April is the coolest month. While in literature we have seen April is celebrated, spring is celebrated. But here what happens is there is reversal, paradox, irony, and that is April is the coolest month. Same with the burial of the dead. Burial of the dead, in the book of prayer, it is I am the resurrection. But here it says death, buried, and never to have a possibility of any resurrection. Then comes the second, a game of chess. You have a game of chess, then intensifying, sterile, disconnected human life. There what happens is dramatizes two types of sterile relationship. What is that one? One is the high society lady, nervous high society lady, and the other one is the pub women talking. And then the rising development. First the exposition, then rising development, rises to climax, the crisis of the drama here, and that is the fire sermon. The conflict reaches its peak. Now, in conflict reaches its peak, what happened is polluted river, mechanical typist clerk encountered Tiresias, the unifying consciousness of this poem. Then you have a Plato of reflection. That is the fourth part, where you have a meditative pause, and the last you will find a possible way out, and that is the denouement or partial catharsis, or denouement is a French word meaning resolution. Means end of it. And death by water is Plato of reflection. You think about your death. Everyone should think about that way. What the thunder said, suffering of Jesus, a vision of renewal. That is from the Upanishad. So suffering, Upanishad, comes to the end. Slowly it comes to the end of it. So the structure as such is quite unified. It's very strong in that way. And each word, even articles, very carefully chosen and added to titles, prefixed to titles. And as I told you, there is a very beautiful structure. Exposition, rising action, crisis, critical. Then there is a Plato of reflection, and finally there is a possibility of renewal or regeneration. And that is the Upanishadic admonitions. So, and with that the poem comes to an end. Sometime back in 1934, I have already mentioned Vindhya Davis. He said it is a spurious work of algebra. That's what it is, all confusion. But actually it is not like that. It has got dramatic unity, it has a plot, it has a development, a theme, development of theme, and also it has got the different points that like exposition, then rising action, and then critical crisis, conflict reaches the peak, then the slow Plato of reflection, and finally there is a hope of resolution. So this is the wasteland. Okay, structure of the wasteland. Of course, we will go through this later in detail. From just giving you, before we end up, we should have some idea. If you think that all 5 sections are different, there is no connection and so on, no, it's not like that. It's very, what I must say, thoughtfully and also perfectly done. There's a unity that we must understand. Only then we will be able to appreciate this poem in the best possible way. Okay, bye.